Have you ever felt that inexplicable pull towards someone, as if invisible threads were connecting your souls across time and space? This is the story of Eliza and James, two people who found each other against impossible odds, proving that some loves are simply written in the stars. If this journey of fate and resilience touches your heart, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more stories that remind us of the extraordinary power of love. Eliza Morgan stood at the edge of the cliff, watching waves crash against jagged rocks below. The wind whipped her chestnut hair around her face as tears streamed down her cheeks. 3 years had passed since the accident that took her fiancé, and the weight of that loss still pressed against her chest like a stone. She had come to this remote coastal town in Maine to escape, to heal, to find some way forward when every path seemed shrouded in fog. She hadn't planned to stay in Harborview longer than a weekend. The small cottage rental was supposed to be a brief respite from her demanding job as a trauma surgeon in Boston. But something about the rhythm of the waves, the call of gulls, and the unhurried pace of life had convinced her to extend her stay. 1 week became 2, then a month, and now she found herself contemplating a more permanent change. James Sullivan had lived in Harborview his entire life, except for the years he spent overseas with the Marines. The local bookstore he'd opened after returning home was his sanctuary, a place where stories lived and breathed between weathered covers. His friends often joked that he was married to his shop, and perhaps they weren't entirely wrong. After watching his parents' volatile relationship implode during his childhood, James had built walls around his heart that few had managed to scale. The morning Eliza wandered into his bookstore seeking shelter from an unexpected downpour, James was reorganizing the classics section. The bell above the door jingled, and he looked up to see a woman shaking raindrops from her coat, her face flushed from the cold. "Sorry to drip all over your floor," she said with an apologetic smile. James found himself momentarily speechless, struck by something in her eyes, a familiar sadness he recognized all too well. "Don't worry about it," he finally managed. "Rain is practically our town mascot." Eliza laughed, and the sound seemed to brighten the shop's dim corners. She browsed the shelves while her coat dried, eventually selecting a dog-eared copy of East of Eden. "Excellent choice," James said as she approached the counter. "Steinbeck at his finest." "I've read it before," she admitted. "But some books deserve multiple visits, don't they?" Their conversation flowed easily, jumping from literature to the town's history to the best place for clam chowder. By the time the rain stopped, an hour had passed, and James found himself inviting her to the local diner for lunch. Over steaming bowls of chowder, they discovered a shared love for early morning walks, obscure documentaries, and the particular satisfaction of finding the perfect word to describe a feeling. What began as casual conversation gradually revealed deeper connections. Both had experienced profound loss, both struggled with letting people in, both found solace in the vastness of the ocean. As weeks passed, they fell into a comfortable routine. Mornings often found them walking along the shore, afternoons with Eliza reading in a corner of James's bookstore, evenings spent cooking together in his small apartment above the shop. They moved cautiously, two people well acquainted with pain, testing the waters of vulnerability one revelation at a time. For Eliza, the growing feelings terrified her. Loving again meant risking loss again, and she wasn't sure her heart could survive being shattered twice. One evening, after James had casually mentioned planning a trip together in the spring, panic seized her. The next morning, she packed her bags and drove back to Boston without saying goodbye, convinced she was protecting them both. James was devastated. The rejection confirmed his deepest fears, that he wasn't meant for love, that happiness was temporary at best. He threw himself into work, expanding the bookstore's hours and volunteering for every community event that would keep his mind occupied. But Eliza's absence left a void that books and busyness couldn't fill. Meanwhile, Eliza resumed her life in Boston, returning to grueling hospital shifts and her sterile apartment. She told herself she'd made the right decision, that the intensity of her feelings for James had been a product of grief and isolation. But as weeks turned to months, the city that had once felt like home now seemed hollow, its noise and pace grating rather than energizing. During a particularly difficult shift, Eliza lost a young patient on her operating table. The boy had reminded her of her fiancé, same crooked smile, same unwavering optimism even in the face of pain. After the failed surgery, she found herself in the hospital chapel, tears flowing freely as she confronted the truths she'd been avoiding. Running from love wouldn't protect her from pain. Life offered no guarantees except the certainty that without risk, there could be no joy. That night, she called her hospital director and requested an extended leave of absence. By morning, she was driving north, her heart pounding with equal measures of hope and fear. When she arrived in Harborview, a spring storm was brewing. She parked outside the bookstore, gathering courage as rain began to fall. Through the window, she could see James helping an elderly customer, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. The sight of him, slightly thinner, his beard grown out, made her breath catch. The bell jingled as she entered, and James looked up. For a moment neither spoke, the air between them charged with unspoken words. The customer, sensing the tension, quickly made her purchase and left. "I made a mistake," Eliza said simply, water dripping from her coat just as it had the first day they met. James remained behind the counter, his expression guarded. "Which one? Coming here the first time, or leaving, or coming back?" "Leaving," she said, taking a step forward. "I've spent my whole life running from pain, James. After losing David, I promised myself I'd never be that vulnerable again. But these past months made me realize something. I was already in pain. Loneliness, fear, regret, they hurt too. And at least with you, there was joy mixed with the risk." James moved slowly from behind the counter. "How do I know you won't run again when things get difficult?" "You don't," she admitted. "And I can't promise I won't be scared. But I can promise I'll talk to you about it instead of disappearing. I can promise to try, every day, to choose love over fear." She took another step toward him. "If you'll give me another chance." The silence stretched between them, filled with the sound of rain against windows and the distant rumble of thunder. Then James closed the distance between them, taking her hands in his. "I've missed you," he said simply. "Every day." Their reconciliation wasn't immediate or perfect. Trust, once broken, required patience to rebuild. They agreed to move slowly, to communicate honestly, to acknowledge their fears rather than let them dictate their choices. Eliza found a position at the regional hospital 30 minutes away, and they established a rhythm that honored both their need for connection and their independent spirits. 6 months later, during a meteor shower they watched from their cliff, James proposed. Not with promises of forever, they both knew too well how fragile such guarantees could be, but with a commitment to presence, to choosing each other through whatever life brought their way. They married the following summer in a small ceremony by the ocean. Eliza's hospital colleagues and James's town friends gathered to witness two people who had found in each other not completion, but companionship on life's unpredictable journey. Years passed, bringing with them the expected joys and sorrows. They welcomed a daughter, then a son. They weathered James's mother's dementia, the economic downturn that threatened the bookstore, Eliza's breast cancer scare. Through it all, they held fast to the lesson they'd learned during their separation, that love wasn't about avoiding pain but about facing it together. On their 20th anniversary, they returned to the cliff where their story had truly begun. Gray streaked their hair now, and laugh lines framed their eyes. As the sun set over the water, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, James squeezed Eliza's hand. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't come back that day?" he asked. Eliza shook her head. "No. Somehow, I think we would have found our way to each other again. Some souls are just meant to be together." And as they stood there, silhouetted against the fading light, it was impossible not to believe that some loves truly are written in the stars, not as predetermined destiny, but as possibility waiting for the courage to choose it, again and again, through all of life's seasons. If this story touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Remember that the greatest love stories aren't about perfect people finding each other, but about real people choosing each other every day despite imperfections. Share in the comments your own experiences with love that persevered against the odds. because every love story deserves to be told.